image.
Shani, let me ask you and pick up on the point that was made here. And I'll start by asking you about the security issue, because that is going to continue to be paramount as we really start to build this digital dream out. We're still in the midst of putting together a policy. We've had the Sri Krishna Committee present its report, which is still under public consultation. When do you believe will we have a robust protection and privacy code in place?
We have a judgment from the Supreme Court which has laid down the foundation for what needs to be done. Privacy for Indian citizens has been recognized
as a right.
A fundamental right. It emanates from the fundamental rights, and after that we've had very eminent group of experts headed by Justice Sri Krishna, which has gone through a process of extensive consultation. They have given us an excellent report, draft bill, personal data protection bill.
Yes.
I think it's also very important to recognize what it is and what it is not. It's basically a framework designed for protection and privacy pertaining to personally identifiable data of Indian residents. I think together we will be able to find the right mix of what constitutes a balance between providing privacy for the taking care of the privacy concerns, yet providing access to data and leaving room for tremendous amount of innovation. We need innovation. We need technology. We need to use the best of analytics that are coming our way. We need to deploy AI, and we need to do that to be able to. It's going to be somewhat disruptive for many sectors. But we want it to be disruptive for poverty. We want it to be disruptive for exclusion.
Yes.
So to do that, I think data needs to be available, and yet privacy concerns have to be taken care of.
It is a balance, and I think a lot of governments around the world are trying to negotiate what is a tough task at this point in time. But Dilip Aspe, let me ask you this, and then I'll come to you, CK, on exactly this issue. One of the irritants that is being spoken of today, and that could perhaps have long-term implications on our ability to innovate, on our ability to be able to draw in foreign companies to operate in India or work with Indian companies, is this business of data localization. And there is an RBI circular that comes into effect from October. How much of a worry is this?
No, I think the data localization ask of RBI, I don't think it's an unfair ask, right? You know, if you're processing the data of citizens where the customer's bank and all the participants in the transactions are residing in India, the data to be available in India, I think it's a fair ask from that standpoint. And the rule applies to everybody, whether it's a big company, small company. So I think it's a fair rule, and all the companies, there is a deadline, and all the companies will have to comply by that.
So CK, you know, Indian law and Indian regulation, and you've got the GDPR in the EU. I mean, the regulatory environment around the world is changing. You've got other problems as well related to trade and immigration. But from a technology point of view, you know, one assumes that we're moving to a borderless world, but that clearly isn't the case today. So what is this going to mean now in terms of operations, in terms of innovation?
Yeah, I think the regulations like what India is currently contemplating on data privacy and domicility of the data and things like that, it's been very common in most of the Western countries, fairly in an advanced state of implementation. And I think we should just welcome these steps because it's very important. Data and privacy needs to be handled in a very, very responsible manner. Because while there is a lot of data which is getting collected, who is the real owner of the data? Right? That's a question which really needs to be answered, and in a very, very responsible manner. But at the same time, we do believe this identifiable data can also be very, very useful in a lot of scenarios. So I think there are pros and cons, and we need to see how to use data and privacy related information in a more responsible manner. I think the step that's being taken in India is definitely in the right direction.
This is going to be crucial for you, isn't it, Doc, and for the healthcare space especially?
Obviously, one of the primest things you want to keep to yourself is your health data. And sharing it on common platforms gives you great benefits, because no matter where you are, it can be accessed. If you get into an emergency and you are somewhere where they don't know and you're not in a position to give your history, in any case nobody can give the exact history. To be able to pull up your electronic medical record anywhere is a great asset.
Yeah.
Of course, the concerns are the same all around, because many things have been done, like pharmaceutical companies will try to get access to that data to be able to innovate their own stuff. So all this stuff, cat and mouse game, will continue. But I think the fundamentals are what we innovate for India, and especially for those 500 million people that we are talking about. There are 4 billion people around us who need the same innovation. They are deprived of healthcare and everything else also.
Right.
That is the opportunity of India. That's the soft power of India, which we must concentrate on.
Let me get back to the audience for any questions that you may have. Yes, sir, we'll get a microphone across to you.
I am Vikram from Bharti Airtel. I head the Wi-Fi business for Bharti Airtel. My question is to Mr. Sahani. Yes, in line with the theme, the technology, everyone is accepting, yes, it is going to propel the growth. But it hinges on various parts of the ecosystem. And one of the key elements I just want to raise in this forum is the media, that is the backhaul media I'm talking about. When we talk about smart city rollout or rural Wi-Fi, as you were referring, it hinges on the one window clearance, the right of way permissions, or I would rather say the private-public partnership. Do you want to throw some light on that? Any reform changes or anything has been...
This is a big pain point that the telecom industry has been faced with, Mr. Shani, for many years now, and they've been fighting this battle with the government. And it impacts the targets that you have set in terms of connectivity.
Good news is that with the Smart Cities program, with 100 cities participating in that, urban planners and administrators are now owning or taking the responsibility for bringing modern services, modern technology to the residents of those cities. And instead of looking at right of way as a revenue item, making telecom access available, making broadband access available is an investment.
Right.
The more you invest, the quicker you invest, the easier you make it, the better results you have for your economy.
But Chuck, since we talked about smart cities, I would very quickly want to segue into that, because this is an area that Cisco's been working on. You're involved with about 18 odd smart cities here in India. You've seen it through over the last few years. Where do things currently stand? What more would you like to see change perhaps on the ground?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand that you have to have your expectations right when we say the word smart city. Because I think people believe that you come in and flip a switch and everything is just done. And the reality is that we've been involved in these around the world for the last decade. And the most successful efforts that we see are those who pick very specific use cases and don't try to do everything at once. But let's go, we want to deal with traffic, or I want to deal with water management, I want to deal with waste management. And I think that's what we've seen here that is actually very promising, because you have to prove the capability at first. So to some extent there's a level of frustration that it's not moving fast enough, but the reality is that you have to go at it use case by use case, and they have to be prioritized based on the impact that each of them can have given in the city that you're actually in, and I think that's the most important thing.
Chuck, manufacturing in India, and since we're talking about being able to drive down costs, we're talking about frugal innovation, we're talking about technology that can be made accessible, what's the prescription for being able to do that at scale?
So I think that as part of the Make in India initiative, we began to do some assembly of products here. So we brought some level of manufacturing into India. And when I look at the technology marketplace and my peers and colleagues, the real key is for us to continue to encourage and bring the ecosystem of the supply chain to India. Because to the extent that technology providers have to ship components in from, places around the world as opposed to being able to source them locally, it increases the cost of the technology and makes it less attractive. But we're working on trying to figure that out and how can we actually get to that place. We actually were talking about it some this morning as well. And I think that if we can find a way to encourage major players in the component portion of our supply chain to come here, then not only will it help us increase our ability to manufacture what are incredibly high-end complex products versus some of the technology that gets delivered that isn't quite as high-end and complex as what we build, but I think then we have the ability to bring other companies here once the ecosystem's here.
With new technologies come new opportunities.
Do not underestimate the power of the younger generation.
We believe that at least 50% of population should be transacting digitally in 5 years' time.
Let me get wrap-up comments from each of our panelists now. And Dilip, I'll start by asking you, since we're talking about this roadmap for digital inclusion, from the payments perspective, what's the NPCI roadmap? And leave me with a 12-month target and roadmap, and leave me with a 5-year outline as well.
No, I think the 5-year outline it looks absolutely great, and we believe that at least 50% of population should be transacting digitally in 5 years' time. That's what we believe. And when we look at normally in a progressive country, the digital payments is a fraction, is a subset of the population what exists in the country, and that's why where we believe the day is not far where we process 1 billion transactions a day, right? That's what we are looking at in long-term outlook. In a short term, 12 months, we believe our approach to create an ecosystem and get more and more players into payments. And that's where the fintech, we keep on encouraging fintechs to come and, either attach UPI for their payment stack or be a payment startup itself, right? So in next 12 months, we believe hundreds of startups should come in, and that will help us to go to that 5-year vision of crossing 1 billion transactions.
1 billion transactions in 5 years, that's the target. CK, 12 months, 5-year plan.
I would say 5 years is the right kind of a metric. But overall, I mean, just kind of reflecting on this and summarizing some of this, I mean, I think we need to be very, very optimistic about how technology can solve some of the very, very fundamental issues, whether it is in healthcare, education, transportation, financial services, and every technology stack, whether it is AI, machine learning, or drones or 3D printing, each one will provide a quantum jump in our ability and speed to execute. So adoption of these technologies in a very insightful manner is what is going to help kind of really bridge generational gap as to what really can be accomplished.
So the future is bright. Doc.
So now the chuck is here, and we know we have 500 million people waiting out there. We need to come up with solutions which are much cheaper than we have today. So how Cisco can help to actually improve this connectivity in models which are more affordable, because the government has taken on a huge leap in this direction. You know, worldwide, you know, in America, after spending 16, 17 trillion from the economy, spending 16, 17, 18% of your GDP on health, you cannot provide health to 350 million people.
Yeah.
So how ambitious it is? It's fantastically ambitious. But should we all put our heads together and make it work? Most definitely.
Mr. Shani, final say to you.
I think we have two major milestones, a set of targets for 2022 when India completes 75 years of independence, and again certain targets for 2025. We have this large base within the country yet to cover, get everyone onto the networks, get health, education, agriculture, and ease of living kind of technologies into operation for everyone. With new technologies come new opportunities.
Right.
And we have lots of youngsters, lot of small and tiny and medium companies which are waiting to bring their solutions on board. How do we help them? How do we sort of just spur them along? How do we accelerate their progress?
Yes.
And so that, I think, is a major area for us to focus on.
So Chuck, the challenge to Cisco is how do you marry connectivity with inclusion? India has consistently been Cisco's top performer, at least in the top 3. This is the challenge that India throws Cisco's way, marry connectivity and inclusion. What can we expect?
Well, I think we have to understand, and I think we do understand, that the first priority that we have is to get high-speed connectivity at a reasonable price everywhere in this country to everyone. And then once you do that, then everything else we've talked about becomes possible. And so our number one priority is to continue to work on delivering cost-effective connectivity with our partners here in this country, and that's what we're going to do. I want to reiterate that we still will work on smart cities and Make in India, modernization of transportation, IoT, how it applies to agriculture. But I also want to just revisit the point you just made. Do not underestimate the power of the younger generation. And if we can find a way to unleash their intellectual capacity, their understanding of technology, and their desire to make a difference in the world, they might actually teach us how to solve a lot of the problems that we face today together. So I think that is a huge initiative that we should commit ourselves to, in addition to driving connectivity everywhere in this country.
Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here this morning with your thoughts, ideas and insights on how we can truly unleash the power of technology and thereby unleash the power of India. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here this morning.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Shireen, for that very, very engaging and very insightful session on leveraging technology for inclusive growth. And now I'd like to invite Samir Garde, President, India and SAARC at Cisco, to come and deliver the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Mridul. What an engaging panel discussion. And thanks everyone for coming early in the morning over here, and I really appreciate that, and Shireen for conducting a very efficient panel discussion here today. So I think very clearly we talked about 4 or 5 things, right? So how India needs to continue to do frugal innovation to leapfrog some of the technology phases. And I think Cisco is committed to making sure, like Chuck said, that we provide high-speed internet with low latency to make sure we enable 3 areas of innovation, 3 or 4 big areas of innovation that we talked about today. So I think the number one thing that we can enable as an organization that is very committed to India, number one is social innovation. I think we talked a lot about healthcare, education, and how high-speed internet and low latency, 5G, and all of those things can help accelerate social innovation in the areas of healthcare and education. And helping save lives is a very, very good and nice and noble cause which technology can deliver. I think the second area that we spoke about was more around financial innovation. And I think India can probably leapfrog most nations in that area. And I think one is to say we will get to 1 billion transactions a day, but the other is to see how we can get 51 million SMBs to transact online or have transactions done so that businesses can move faster. So I think the second area is financial innovation that we talked about. And lastly, I think all of this kind of brings the problem or the opportunity of data and security around data and overall cybersecurity. And I think we touched upon all those areas, and I think that's going to be an imperative. But none of this will be possible if we don't have a trusted relationship with the government and making sure that we work with the government to drive all of these initiatives, both on technology rollouts and also on the innovation on the 3 or 4 areas that I talked about. So again, thank you very much, and really appreciate all of you being here, and thank you from Cisco. Thank you.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.